Irashaimase. Hello and welcome to Fataris' Kitchen. I'm your host, Chef Fataris. It's time once again for Shoot 'em Up Saturday. And on the menu this week we have Metal Black, a Taito arcade classic. What kind of taste will it have? Let's get cooking and find out. From developer Taito, Metal Black released to arcades in '91. It would also see notable ports to the Sega Saturn and inclusion on several compilations. So this title is one that I definitely encourage you to play. Any shoot 'em up fan should enjoy the Taito shoot 'em ups at least to some degree, and this one is one that is notable for some of the mechanics and some really awesome visuals. So whether it be this arcade archive release or the Egret 2 mini release, I would encourage you to seek out this title and, well, just enjoy it. With that said, let's dive into the game and see what we have here. So, after you put coins in, the machine unfortunately is relatively plain in the way that it presents things. It does support 2 players simultaneous, so that's the way we're going to experience it today. Starting up the game, we do kind of have this neat launch sequence in the fighter that we fly in this particular game, the Black Fly. So there is a decent little bit of story here where we're playing as basically a rogue pilot defending Earth from this alien force called Nemesis, using this technology that was developed and then ultimately shelved, even though it basically cost humanity, well, the Earth. This is the title screen's relatively a little bit on the depressing side, but right off the bat you can see some really great visuals in the background with the various colors as well as the parallax you've got going on, and some neat foreground pixel art as well, like this destroyed carrier. So let's talk about the mechanics that we have available. The gameplay is actually relatively simple in this one, and that's one of the things I enjoy about this one. So you've got your main shot, and it starts off at a relatively weak level, and then we also have energy beam that we can release from the energy we've stored up. Where do we get this energy? Picking up these blue, yellow, and red power-ups called neurons. So basically this is the enemy technology that we're using against the enemy themselves to defeat them. So that neuron technology basically allows for these beams we're using, and the more we collect, the higher our beam levels at the bottom of the screen get, to the point where it can be maxed out. But one of the neat mechanics with that is if you press the button to release your beam, you'll start using that, and if you hold down the button, you'll get this awesome beam. If it's at full power, and you release the button, you'll kind of get this screen wiping lightning. However, there is a downside to using your beam. So you'll notice the player 1 screen, the beam level is completely empty, and we have to collect more neurons to power that up. However, player 2 is still at full power, so should this enemy here, which is also actually collecting the neurons, just a neat little animation there, uses their neuron beam, then we can counter that, kind of like Gradius and that sort of system, not Gradius, Darius, G Darius and that system, and ultimately throw their attacks back at them. And using that system as well as just hitting the boss really hard. Boss of stage 1 already finished. Some neat mechanics there. So we move on to the bonus level as we launch from Earth via those booster rockets attached to the bottom of the Black Fly. The bonus levels are interesting. They're between stages 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. And what we're doing here is we've got cursors that we can use to target the enemies. We're kind of moving around. So part of this was to go and show off the technology that Taito was using for their arcade hardware here. I believe the F1 arcade board. So it was built with the ability for scaling, rotation, that sort of thing. And it's showing that off here as we can move around, and you're seeing these enemies zoom around, and the missiles eventually hit their target. It's a little bit of a slow bonus stage, and you're not in any danger of losing lives here. We're just taking pot shots with our homing missiles at these enemies as we zoom out of the atmosphere. So if you're playing two-player, each character does have their own cursor, so you can target the enemies, and you get 1,000 points per kill here, so it's possible to rack up a few points, but it's not necessarily a super high-scoring bonus stage. It's kind of like a neat tech demo slash interlude between stages. So while we're doing this, like it's notable to bring up some of the similarities between the two ships that we fly. Both of the black flies that we use for two-player, one is kind of like the default black silverish color, but the player 2 ship is kind of a green that, especially when you're blinking and, let's see, invulnerability, is very, very similar to the player 1 ship. So we find ourselves in stage 2 now, flying in front of the moon and dealing with the enemy ships. You've got one thing that I do have a bit of a minor complaint. So there is a lot of enemy design where you've got, and stage design, where you've got enemies and obstacles coming from behind your ship, but we have no way to fire behind us unless we happen to be at full beam and release that particular power. I kind of think that's just a little bit like bad design choices, but ultimately it doesn't detract from the enjoyment too much. There's one or two bosses later in the game that particular element does get frustrating in my particular opinion. A lot of the bosses really do look like they're are planning for you to use that beam counter system that the game has to defeat them in a timely fashion, so do keep that in mind. There is occasionally a slowdown with a lot of enemies on screen, and we do have some even enemy shots that are invulnerable to or being able to take out those little orbs, and even the boss in this stage has some orbs that we will be unable to handle in any other way than simply dodging, so there is that to keep in mind. As always, the hamster port here for the Arcade Archive is solid as solid can be, so definitely a recommend here. That was the section there, kind of along the lines of what I was talking about, just some difficulties being able to dodge the enemies that come from behind. Wait, that wasn't the moon. We're actually flying in front of the moon now. What was that behind us the entire time? So I actually really appreciated this little bit the first time I saw it. We'll let this boss go and fully reveal itself. So this game really does ooze style, with the way that you've got enemies collecting the neurons themselves, the introduction of this particular boss. On the minus flavor, the game is a bit on the short side. And I do really wish that there was, at only 6 stages, and I do wish there was a little more of a difference between the player 1 and the player 2 ships, especially when there's vulnerability flashes going on, just to make things easier to tell oneself apart. So that lightning is the effect that you can get when you release the button upon firing your beam energy. it's great for clearing the screens, but you really do want to save those beams for the boss if possible. And that's round 2. As far as the plus flavors are concerned, so I really do like the really simple power-up system of just collecting the neurons to build up beams, and that's basically your bomb slash your superpower. The pixel art in this game is just absolutely gorgeous, definitely very just providing some great examples of the work that Taito was doing around the early 90s. Unfortunately, the music isn't quite as strong as like Zuntata's other work in the era, but it's still solid. And the arcade-like gameplay here is top-notch. So especially if you're a fan of 90s arcade shooters and you haven't picked up Black or Metal Black in one form or another, this is a release I highly encourage you to check out. Alright, that'll just about wrap it up for this week's episode of Shoot 'em Up Saturday. As always, thank you so much for joining us. I hope you have a wonderful week, and I look forward to seeing you again next time.